A long, long time ago, we as humans were running away from tigers in the field, trying not to get eaten for lunch. And one of our best defenses against this was being able to do shape identification. Now, there's all kind of details on the tiger. There's stripes, there's teeth, but most importantly, he has an external shape. And we know that that is dangerous. Well, the same goes when you identify anything visual. So if you look at this cast of characters, you may recognize them as bad guys. In fact, as you can see here, these are the Disney villains. But when they are simplified into a single black shape, you can really focus on what makes them menacing looking. All of those particular details with spikes and spears, all the things that make them look nasty, are no accident. Because part of living in our culture is learning about certain visual icons. It's sort of like a common hidden language that we all understand even if we don't realize we're actively thinking about it. So as a good designer, you're going to use those icons to your advantage. You're going to use the correct icons to say the correct message. And so one of the most basic messages is sharp is dangerous. Nature tells us this. All you need to do is get pricked by one needle to know by looking at this guy that he is bad news. You don't want to touch a porcupine. So when you see a porcupine, you think danger. And our brain is really good at simplifying, at categorizing. So as a designer, you could take the idea of a porcupine shape and simplify it. So here I've sort of cartooned the silhouette of a porcupine, and it still says danger. It's got big, sharp spines. And this is a shape that I could shrink down and it would still be visible. Now, obviously, the spines are not big and wide like this. This is a bit more like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it still says danger. So you could apply that same general visual convention to these two characters. Which one is the bad guy? Well, the one on the left has a heroic pose, and the one on the right's a bit hunched over. But more importantly, the one on the right has long, slender, pointy fingers and spiky points on his head. So when I reveal these characters, you can see that one is Hercules and one is Hades. Good guy, bad guy. But they are using shape language to their advantage. And this idea rings true when you look at this Pinewood Derby car. Obviously, this is not a real porcupine, but it got the most important part, the spines. So even though the medium has totally changed here, the execution is absolutely different, you can still tell what the overall shape is saying. You can still tell what animal is being represented. Here's another example of an animal that is using shape to its advantage. You see this guy in the desert, you are not going to want to go up and pet him. That's because he is very spiky. And likewise, if you were designing a bad guy, this might be a great candidate for inspiration. Because there's nothing inherently bad about a lizard. Now, this is going to change depending on what culture you're from, but generally speaking, no animal is either good or evil. We have a certain cultural understanding of the icons, like a spike, that sort of imbue them with different qualities. So I know this lizard is not going to come up to me and bite me because he's a bad guy, but if I were to use some of his shape aspects on one of my villain characters, it would make them read as more evil. And oftentimes, to understand where these icons come from, you have to look to their cultural underpinning. So how about this guy? You recognize him? Satan has been depicted in a lot of different ways over the years, but in our sort of popular mythology, he has been branded with a few different shapes. And this is really evident when you do a quick Google image search. Here's what some of the results pulled up. So you can see this is a bunch of different artists all envisioning the same character. And they're all certainly different, but there are a lot of similarities. Where these drawings overlap are the cultural icons. These are the elements that will make your design just ring true. So what have we got here? We've got a tail with a triangle on the end. We've got a trident that also has triangles on the tips. We have spiky horns and a bat wing. Those are sort of the main devil icons. And if you really wanted to reduce these even further, you could essentially simplify it into a pointy triangle. That's sort of the lowest common denominator that explains the devil. Well, this reminds me of a character, Darth Vader. So here I did a quick, simple drawing of Darth Vader. This was maybe 10 seconds. But obviously, the most important feature is there, his basic shape. Is it an accident that his basic shape is essentially a big pointy triangle? I don't know. But he's really making use of classic icon imagery. So if you think about the devil and think that he is a classically evil bad guy, well, let's see where else those horn icons are used. If you look at traditional military helmets, their job is to protect the wearer, but also to scare the enemy. Well, what a great opportunity for devil horns. Here's a picture of a motorcycle helmet, a couple guys from video games, and a movie bad guy. They're all wearing horns and spikes around their armor. Some of it is functional, but a lot of it is for show. A lot of it is giving a message. These are bad guys. So if we look back here at this cast of Disney bad guys, we can see some spikes. And importantly, this is their silhouette. I'm not even showing you any of the interior shapes here, just their large primary shape. And one great thing about horns and spikes is that they protrude from the form. No matter how you look at this character, you're always going to see their spikes. They have sort of a initial read about them. Just like if you were out in the wilderness and you saw this dinosaur, one of the first things you would notice about them is the large horn on the face. It's because it always protrudes from their primary shape. It's nature saying, go away. So when designing a character, you're going to think first in terms of a large major shape. If it was Darth Vader, I would essentially be thinking of the triangle. And then as you have a longer time to look at the character, you're going to notice the medium and small size details. So it's sort of a visual hierarchy, beginning with that initial read, the silhouette. Now, even though the devil is a very obvious example, the idea of taking shape and imbuing it with a message goes way beyond just characters. Because let's take a look at these two different boats. They were both built by a person. They're probably both very expensive, but they have very different shapes. If you look at the one on the top, it looks fast. The one on the bottom looks like it might hold a lot of people and maybe host parties. It's got that sort of long horizontal platform. Well, let's reduce these shapes down to sort of a simplified diagram. The one on the top looks almost like an animal, like a fish that would swim through the water, or potentially a bird that would fly through the air, where the one on the bottom looks more like a building. Well, each of these designs is an example of the balance between form and function. Probably each of these boats could have looked less specific. They could have been sort of an average boat, people could have gone on it, and it would float on the water. But these boats want to say something. Especially if you're spending this much money, you want people to know that your boat either goes really fast, or you want to show off your elaborate parties. So you build a big, wide, flat platform. These boats have a very clear message. And it's no accident that the shapes reinforce what they're trying to say. If you take a look here at these cars and a plane, you've got the left side are fast. The right side, they're a little more boxy. Maybe they're a little more practical. So if we just look at the silhouettes here, you can really see the difference is pronounced. One has a very sleek, sexy design language. The other one is a bit more of a blob. And you may not be a car person or know anything about planes, but you could probably tell from sort of a gut level that the ones on the left are fast and exciting. The ones on the right, maybe good for carrying people around. And this is in large part due to functionality. There is a utility to shaping your car in a sleek aerodynamic way. But it is also an intent. The cars want to say, I'm fast. My owner is powerful. Whereas the cars on the right side of the page say a different message. They say, I'm efficient. I'm practical. My owner is thrifty. And you don't have to be a boat person or a car person to look at this sheet of images and know that there is something in common. These vehicles are all work vehicles. And sure, you could say that it's because they're dirty or because they have specific tiny details, but when you reduce these to their silhouettes, they all have relatively similar silhouettes. They are very blocky. They have very pronounced angles. They don't even necessarily have an obvious front and back, so it can be hard to tell which direction they go in. And in practical terms, that means they're not particularly aerodynamic. So shape is going to tell you a lot of different things. Primarily, it's going to infuse the object with icon. You're going to have sort of a cultural emphasis based on what shapes you choose to use. And it also has this idea of form and function. If something is sleek and streamlined, it's going to say a different message than if it is blocky and utilitarian. So in the next video, we're going to take these basic rules and we're going to apply them to an actual design.